In a democracy, we have always had to worry about the ignorance of the uneducated. Today we have to worry about the ignorance of people with college degrees. It's amazing how much panic one honest man can spread among a multitude of hypocrites. I have never understood why it is greed to want to keep the money you have earned but not greed to want to take somebody else's money. When you want to help people, you tell them the truth. When you want to help yourself, you tell them what they want to hear. Much of the social history of the Western world over the past 3 decades has involved replacing what worked with what sounded good. The problem isn't that Johnny can't read. The problem isn't even that Johnny can't think. The problem is that Johnny doesn't know what thinking is. He confuses it with feeling. Intellect is not wisdom. There are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. Socialism in general has a record of failure so blatant that only an intellectual could ignore or evade it. There are only 2 ways of telling the complete truth, anonymously and posthumously. When people get used to preferential treatment, equal treatment seems like discrimination. It is amazing that people who think we cannot afford to pay for doctors, hospitals, and medication somehow think that we can afford to pay for doctors, hospitals, medication, and a government bureaucracy to administer it. Freedom has cost too much blood and agony to be relinquished at the cheap price of rhetoric. The fact that the market is not doing what we wish it would do is no reason to automatically assume that the government would do better. The most basic question is not what is best, but who shall decide what is best. The fact that so many successful politicians are such shameless liars is not only a reflection on them, it is also a reflection on us. When the people want the impossible, only liars can satisfy. One of the consequences of such notions as entitlements is that people who have contributed nothing to society feel that society owes them something, apparently just for being nice enough to grace us with their presence. Rhetoric is no substitute for reality. Competition does a much more effective job than government at protecting consumers. If politicians stopped meddling with things they don't understand, there would be a more drastic reduction in the size of government than anyone in either party advocates. One of the sad signs of our times is that we have demonized those who produce, subsidized those who refuse to produce, and canonized those who complain. If you have been voting for politicians who promise to give you goodies at someone else's expense, then you have no right to complain when they take your money and give it to someone else, including themselves. It is hard to imagine a more stupid or more dangerous way of making decisions than by putting those decisions in the hands of people who pay no price for being wrong. No government of the left has done as much for the poor as capitalism has. What is history but the story of how politicians have squandered the blood and treasure of the human race? We seem to be getting closer and closer to a situation where nobody is responsible for what they did, but we are all responsible for what somebody else did. If you are not prepared to use force to defend civilization, then be prepared to accept barbarism. The poor of today can afford things that the affluent of yesterday could only dream about. Liberals seem to assume that, if you don't believe in their particular political solutions, then you don't really care about the people that they claim to want to help. The welfare state is the oldest con game in the world. First you take people's money away quietly, and then you give some of it back to them flamboyantly. It is usually futile to try to talk facts and analysis to people who are enjoying a sense of moral superiority in their ignorance.